Thank you, Martha. So first off, I'll be calling on Heleanna. Heleanna is the president at the renowned coffee company. Alright, as Heleanna is making her way, I will also call on SeniduFanuel, who is a senior private sector specialist at Roundtable. And then we have Dr. Teshome, who is a senior government official at Ministry of Labor. And then our Flora, who just presented us the Kenyan experience. Then we have Nesibu, who is the country director in Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Somalia for UNILEVER. Then we have Yohannes, who is the director of the Nutrition Institute at South Africa. And finally, we have Rahel, who is the CEO of our consulting firm. Alright, so thank you all for joining us, and I hope you still have the energy to continue the discussion. So first off is Heleanna. Probably has prepared the space for a long time as a consideration business. How would you describe the overall business environment and what are some of the high level work requirements?
Look, sometimes I get surprised that I was listening to Fiona and what Kenya has done, and we have done the same things, but somehow we are not progressing. I wonder why we are not progressing. So I think the most important thing that we are facing in Ethiopia is high-level decisions and implementation. And the way this is executed is always very confusing. And there is always an issue of trust. So just to give you a simple example, okay, let's say we want to export finished goods from leather, and Ethiopia has a lot of leather. So we need to have high quality of finished items like zippers. And then we become very distrustful of the trader who's going to import the zipper. So we start implementing very high taxes, and we start controlling in customs all the zippers that are coming. So basically what we are importing is very low quality zipper, resulting in a finished material, which is not to an international standard. So, and again, it comes from and execution or high-level decision, policy and vision to executing what we see. So we have industrial parks. When I was in Kenya and I asked, so what are your tax incentives for export? They had a very interesting policy on how to incentivize export in Uganda. They don't oblige you to export. For example, in Ethiopia, we produce face tags, also t-shirts, but they are obliging these companies to export. And then we are importing t-shirts from China that we are taxing at 40% of low quality. So we are exporting the best ones we are producing, but we are importing the lowest ones we can find. So Uganda doesn't force anyone to export, but they say, but if you export more than 80% of your product, I'm going to come and mark your industry area and make it a tax-free zone. So then it's up to you to decide what you want to do. You want to be a tax-free zone and you want to export 80%, or you want to really produce and sell locally. And I want to make a copy. So in Ethiopia, what do? We allow people to import tax-free. I mean, this is a great incentive for a business because we need cars to make our business. But that's not the primary one. And going back to Fiona's discussion on all the challenges of intertrade in Africa, the thing or the problem with intertrade in Africa is like, what does Africa need? We need, for example, to trade exactly what between ourselves. Because until now, we are all of us basically agrarian communities. So what are we going to interchange? leather goods or packed coffee? No. We need to focus on all the things that we need to eat first. And we are not doing that. So we have potatoes, but we are not processing potatoes. We have tomatoes, but we are not processing tomatoes. And these are the things that Europe needs. These are the things that China needs. For example, in Zimbabwe now, the Chinese have signed an agreement of export of lemons. But do we have any agreement of export any agricultural products from Ethiopia? None. And why? Let's go back to the why as a challenge of the private sector. It's because let's say we need to set up a factory for making tomato paste. Then we need to import the machinery, great. We have a tax incentive for doing that. But then we don't have any tax incentive of bringing spare parts. So if machine break down, I have to go to Mercado to look for spare parts without any invoice. And then Mercado comes and says, oh, I don't allow these expenses for running a business. So this goes back to the twisted way of implementing a policy. And then once the production becomes so expensive in Ethiopia, we cannot be competitive in exporting Ethiopian fiber. And I will give you a very concrete example. We are the only company in East Africa producing plastic shaping nets for agricultural products. And I went, because I want to export, so I went to Kenya and I found a counterpart willing to import from us. Guess what? Landing cost in Kenya of our product $300 per kilo. Landed cost from China, $90 per kilo. So Ethiopia cannot export to Kenya. Okay? These are my comments, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Very interesting points that you mentioned. So I'll take you back to Senidu now. We have been discussing a lot about the industrial plants, and you've been involved in developing Moderator. So from your assessment so far, what has worked, what hasn't, and what have the lessons that you have taken?
So on the industrial parts, maybe I'll focus a little bit on the ones that focus on like manufacturing, not agro parts, just because agro parts are just getting started. So we did a study about 18 months, 2 years ago. This was right before conflict and the suspension of agro. So what we noticed was they were actually doing well, given there were only 4 or 5 years at the time, in terms of generating jobs, in terms of bringing in new sectors, popular environment, diversifying markets, because most of them were selling to new markets, which we traditionally not export to, but also a little bit of economic spillover. So just for me to break it down, my simple answer is yes, but until 2021. So I just want to caveat. Because I think the last few years have not been fantastic in terms of what countries were able to do in terms of contribution to the economy. I do understand and hear most of the questions and issues that were raised in the morning as well, but I think that will take us time to go into those discussions. But 2 things to highlight is one, to think of what's the background of industrial parks. What was the rationale? What was the reason why the government felt that's a strategy to operate? And fundamentally, there were 2 issues. One was, given Ethiopia's size and federal structure, it's very difficult to move from intention of investment to actual investment. Because you go through federal government, regional government, local government to get land, and then go through the same process to get power. So in terms of attracting investment, it's such a long process that there needed to be some reason as to how maybe you can still have benefits, right? So that's one part of it. But then the second part of it was in terms of provision of services, even on the public sector side, right? So there's the land infrastructure issue, and then there's the service provision side of it. So the biggest challenge of why industrial parks are just not two. I think we would tend to be stuck a little bit. It's just not one among many. But the idea was that at least by developing a certain specific industrial infrastructure that you make things easier to invest in. How that's implemented, translated, all of that is a full separate conversation, and maybe we don't have time to go into that. But they are also supposed to help create clusters of their agglomerations around certain sectors. So, for instance, around garment, the idea would be you will have textile manufacturers, SMEs, zippers, buttons, all of them in terms of value addition. So that at the end of the day, we're not only cutting, stitching, and exporting, but we gradually developing that, right? So I think that context is very important. And I think we get so caught up with it that we actually forget that it's a tool. But as a tool, as it delivered. So now what our assessment shows is that in terms of jobs, and I think I'll have the numbers, more than 100, at least before maybe November 2021, they have 90,000 jobs, direct jobs. And then I think to end of 2022, it's about 150,000 jobs. And for one formal employment that was generated within your parts, you have, for two part jobs, you have one outside. Even with the weak linkage that Addis with the economy, with the broader domestic economy, right? And this is in a matter of 5 years. And they were creating 1 out of 7 formal jobs in the economy. Yeah, so it's early, yes, there's positive and negative, but if you look at jobs, they were actually on a very steep path in terms of contribution, given jobs is our biggest challenge, one of our biggest challenge. We had also seen that beyond jobs, which we were not able to track just because data wasn't available, was that around the world there was a lot of economic activity that generated, but it was difficult for us to quantify because data is not there. But the data we used, for instance, the network data showed outside of the example because the park was a little bit outside of the city, and you see from 2012 up to 2019, 20, the density of life, which is usually a proxy for economic activity, right? So, but you know, in terms of what exactly it's very difficult for us to market. And then the second one is politics, right? That was one of the reasons why these were totally useful. So in terms of contribution to the manufacturing export in general, in 2014 it was 11%. So the exports from the garment exports was only 11% of our manufacturing export. By 2021 it was 40%. That's a good indication, even though we're looking at garment exports where the countries were predominantly garment investment focused. And most of these were to the US. This is important because US markets is one of the most demanding markets to meet, right? So if you're able to meet to the US, at least anecdotally, it should be easier to meet most of them, even though certain European countries have a higher standard. So the fact that that was able to move gives you an indication that it was actually the right path. But then there were a couple of things which were rational for the industry approach, which actually did not materialize. One is foreign exchange. So in the data we have looked at, by the end of the 5th year, beginning of 6th year, there was not significant foreign exchange contribution in terms of the country's foreign exchange reserves. So that's a failure. There is a whole story behind it. Part of it a little bit connected to the foreign exchange policy of the country. The second one was linkages, and I think this keeps coming again and again. One of the significant maybe lessons is how much there was not deliberate effort to integrate IPs to the domestic economy. I think a presentation in Kenya actually presents that in a lot of ways. So these IPs were importing, processing, and exporting, and there was very little integration in terms of either horizontal linkage, meaning, for instance, you do garment and then you're kind of like a packaging company, or vertical, which would make wool zippers, which is a direct input into the garment. There was little of it. So part of the maybe the data around it is or the failures or whatever perception is around it. And then the last point was in terms of its contribution to structural transformation. Right? The idea of why you want manufacturing is for labor to move from low productivity to a higher productivity, and manufacturing is usually the easiest way to get there. And that transformation hasn't happened because it was disrupted right when it was picking up, taking off. And there was COVID, so 2020 you see a dip, and then 2021 you see a little bit of stabilization coming back, and then starting January 2020 you see a slump. So it's a combination of COVID, conflict, especially of Agora, which has created a lot of challenges for the IPs. I think there are many lessons, this based on what we have seen, and also lessons from other countries. I would like to go through them quickly. I do have, I don't know, maybe 6 of them. But one is a really deliberate look at, yes, the IPs were taught in a deliberative manner in terms of what they were intended to do, but they were not looked at within a context of an ecosystem development, right? So when you do an IP, there are all these issues that were raised earlier, I think in all the discussions around creating linkage, like I said, skills development, technology transfer, linkage between academia and industry, research and development, regional markets. All of this should have been looked at as one thing that needs to develop step by step. So issues around Victorian was recognized later on. So that's one, yeah, ecosystem development. The second one is institutions and policy making, and it goes to what Heleanna had said in terms of having shared vision, policy, implementation, execution. Everybody needs to plan. Shared vision and implementation. The third one, specific to the industrial process, this was raised earlier, so I will not elaborate, is to have a demand-driven phased approach. One downside of what the Ethiopian IP program was the government was too ambitious with very limited capacity they had. The industrial park institutions were built 2014, and then a year later they developed like 6-7 months at the same time without even building a capability. It's too much ambition, and that has because demand-driven phased learn just maybe the class a little bit later. The fourth one is looking at sustainability as a competitive advantage, because we can't run away from climate change. So, as we use it as our advantage in terms of creating competitive advantage compared to others, both on labor but environment as well. Otherwise, especially the light manufacturing industries, which we have to start with in terms of jobs, would be very difficult to follow through. And then the fifth one is not to forget that industrial parks are tools and are supposed to be applied to the platform. Because ideally, where we want to get at is at a certain point, industrial parks will be relevant because the investment climate nationwide gradually is improved by piloting these IPs, right? So specific logistics reform can be the IP and then scale it up. So these are the key lessons of this program. Thank you.
So I think I should have been prepared to explain about IPs. Alright, so now moving on to skills. That was one of the major topics that was raised throughout is we need to develop our skills. And Minister of Labor and Skills, I've been working and creating jobs in the news as well as the I was in alignment with the demanded supply. So most of the TBH workers are not getting jobs, and the industry parks are not getting the right skills, or the manufacturers are not getting the right skills. So how are you applying this?
Thank you for allowing me to share my ministry's position how we are working. I agree with the finding that the skill increasement is of course not the Ethiopian case only, but we were agreed all over. It is close gap in work. The mismatch is not close. Maybe I don't know if we should do, but you have to know that. At this point, I wanted to make clear the value chain of skill development. volume, the naturally is expected, has to start from the demand, as finally case something that discussed by President Rahel. This demand should come from the labor market. That means the market requires labor, skilled labor. This is the base of our curricular standard. But in the next step, after giving this demand and deciding the standard, the next phase is the development, where the providers, the training providers in the industry should take responsibility. This is the failing point. Development needs involvement of industries. That is the Ethiopian case. As my time, I've been in the school in 1980s in high school. I'm the vocational student. We learn everything in the school, but the real world of work is different. So we oblige sometimes to continue like that, but since 2008, the government, parallel to the industrial policy, put in place the vocational training, education training strategy policy, clearly, which is demand training, which demands again the performance of the private industry. Okay, we have tried all this way, a decade more plus, but finally, still a skill mismatch continues. The gap is not wide. Why? Again, deployment is another problem, which is not considered. Because industry want to continue, when you observe, as education person, continue to have less payment, or instead of paying. This is bad culture. Not only in our country, the employment issue is the cause of the skill mismatch again. The deployment. Then come to the supply. Now, all this way, the demand and supply that is overall we call it the skill mismatch. Skill mismatch is undersupply, oversupply, or not fitting into the demand. So the ministry currently is doing to strengthen those issues by strengthening the standard of the trade, by involving the industries, the manufacturers, particularly the industrial parks, our bases, like Awasa and the areas which is mentioned in the report. The other is, the ministry is now encouraging public-private partnership dialogue in this area, and try to, motivating or encouraging the establishment of sector skill councils in different sectors, including manufacturing. For example, we have already started working on agro-processing, where the industry owner, the training providers, and the researchers involved in developing this area and properly produce and making available the skill for this sector. And the other is we are working intensively with development partners to improve the situation. One case, there is a flagship project by the World Bank, East including Kenya, Dejene, and Ethiopia. We are working to establish center of excellence, which is the model showcase, and then scale up by our own efforts. The same, Georgalis is working intensively with us to bridge the gap in this mismatch, to make the linkage between training provider and the industry now. Again, we are working with industrial partners. these things we have to work without any further ado, intensively in order to realize the manufacturing, which is which we have the manufacturing. What are the factors? Because human resource is one of the key production factors which can unlock other production factors. Otherwise, if you bring FDI from other world, we cannot use of it. We cannot get value from it. So, Ethiopian government, because of this, by our assessment on our education training policy, using the university professors, we identified the policy has to be developed again, and the new policy in place since 2022, the end of 2022, that will improve not only the vocational but the university side also. The applied science universities, now 15 applied universities, also working towards this, but we have to continuously develop the other thing is we have undertaken different stages by different partners with different partners. We found the same, the employability of our graduates because of the skill mismatch. So currently the World Bank is the World Bank who initiated another project which will include 15 polytechnics and 24 polytechnics, which will be now the next 5 years produce the competent and employable graduates from this sector. So, in general, what I can say is that the ministry is working with the intention to rebrand the Ethiopian vocational system, rebranding including their physical setup, the inputs, the human inputs, the trainers, the machineries, and working toward skill-linked employment. Because we are not only producing skilled workforce for direct employment by industries, but for self-employment too, which is the base for our manufacturing. As the Kenyan presenter showed us, 60% of their manufacturing is owned by the startups, which come from the universities, from the vocational. And so we want to make life there. So self-employment also need again the skilled workforce. The gap has to be closed. The other is the ministry is working to update the existing strategy and policy, which can encourage the private sector will be the owner of this development to bridge demand, development, deployment, and supply gap. This is what I can say. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So after your discussions of time, for the rest of the participants, so we can go through all the discussions. So going back to the Kenyan experience, I think one of the key areas that we're all struggling with in Ethiopia is the forest challenge. And you have mentioned that Kenya has devalued its forests a while back. So coming to the manufacturing sector and having access to that flow of currency, how has that impacted you, and can you share a bit more about the experience during the devaluation?
Thank you very much. So, of course, like we said, access to finance, I mean, it's one of the biggest things that that we require. So what you tend to find, especially for the FDIs or who are coming into a country, and let me just say we have been looking at your industrial parks, and I think you've done a really good job over time. I think it's just the unfortunate situation that happened here, otherwise it's definitely going to grow. So when they are bringing in their goods, intermediate, what we've done is, I mean, we have a liberal market, so you can bring in your goods, 100% repatriation of profits, and then what we do on the tax regime is importation of raw materials has a slightly lower duty. So raw materials is 0, intermediate is 10 or 25, and finished goods is 35. So those are especially when you join the common markets, there are things that we constantly negotiate to make sure that they're able to bring their goods. But for the FDIs, the people coming into the industrial parks, the special economic zones, they're probably allowed to bring. So I think movement of capital, repatriation of profits is one of the biggest things. I'm using my money, I'm coming out of North America, I want to come and make money in your country, but I want to take it back. So I think that's something that Ethiopia needs to have a think about and really decide how they need, or how, if they want to address it. Because even when I was talking to the CEOs, I was telling you, that's all they said. They said regulation, legislation, and movement of capital.
Thank you. So, going back to the company that is operating in this environment and is handled very well, just want to understand UNILEVER's experience and how you see the domestic market as well. I think most of your products are focused here, so how do you see the potential and how are you operating in this environment?
Okay. Thanks, that's a good question. In UNILEVER, we always say we have two resources. One is our brand, which is more or less global brand, and the other one is people. We are good in looking after our people. The journey so far, it is okay. It's not great. So there are areas which makes great if there is a clear intention and commitment, and there are areas which make it worse if there is no corrective action to be taken now. What are the good parts of working in Ethiopia for a company like UNILEVER? Ethiopia has a huge market potential. It's 120 million population with a growth rate of 2.4% every year. That's just close to 2.5 or 2.6 million added population on a yearly basis. The neighboring country, whether it is Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, South Sudan, they don't have the manufacturing hub which we try to establish in Ethiopia. So there's a huge potential even outside of Ethiopia. The proximity to the Red Sea, that gives us access to export for other countries, even outside of the East Africa regions. So these are the market potential which we are here to utilize for. In terms of human resource, we believe we have a good pool of human resource. One, because of the young workforce we have. Two, the religious background, and those religious background is more orthodox nature, whether it is Muslim or Christian, who have a good moral value. As long as we provide the right training and the right exposure, they can be top class and work outside of the country. So we have a clear aspiration to make UNILEVER Ethiopia as a talent pool or as a net exporter of talent for other countries also in Africa and in the world. There are good experience. We send people to India, which the Indian business want to keep for their own. There are people we send to South Africa, the South African people, they want to keep our talent. So as long as we give the right training and exposure, Ethiopia has a good pool of talent. So that's another good part which gives you the leverage to work in Ethiopia. In terms of the utilities, more or less it's already highlighted. We have cheap electricity, we have cheap water, and other subsidies, whether it is the tax holiday or others. In terms of infrastructure, we have more or less the best world-class or one of the world-class airlines which can make connection or bringing people from different parts of the world much easier. The road infrastructure, there are a massive project which is still undergoing project that gives us easy access to the market and supply. So there are good sides. So these are the opportunities which we utilize as a company. What are the pinpoint which give us sleepless night? Of course, Tori highlighted earlier. The number one is Forex. We usually heavily dependent on capital injection from our parent company. That's the benefit of working in a global company. From that, we move to, utilizing the opportunity in the bank. There now opportunity within traders. So that's how. If there's a commitment, we believe there is a way out. And UNILEVER, we are here for a long term. will not run away. We need to find out our own way. Security, it's already highlighted. That also gives us insecurity for our asset, insecurity for our people, which is the most important resource we have. The tax, yes, there was tax incentive or tax holiday at the beginning, but it seems now the government are try to capture back the incentive for different reasons. So the tax, arbitrary tax, the way the tax levied on manufacturers, particularly for a company like UNILEVER, which have a global sourcing, and due to global sourcing and global purchase, the input cost relatively cheaper than other individual manufacturers or traders. But the government didn't see in the positive way. They assume we are holding or we are under invoicing all our raw materials, but actually it is not under invoicing. It is a benefit we are getting from the scale we have at global network. So these are the three main, on top of all the issues highlighted earlier, these are the three main issues which give us a sleepless night. But like I said, the benefit and then the commitment, we are here for the long term. We have the aspiration to build the Africa, Vietnam, and Ethiopia, because currently the Vietnam business is $1 billion business. So we have that mission, and we are finding our own way. Thanks.
Areas advocating for most right now, as far as tax and also security issues. So going back to the policy and regulation, so we have seen with our policy directions, there is import substitution, export promotion, where should manufacturers focus, and what is your overall outlook from Addis Ababa and as a legal representative from what you've seen so far in the policies? Where do you think the country is leading right now?
Okay. Since 1992, we have witnessed large collection of laws on investment, and the government keeps on issuing these laws, amending it, and these laws in general provide very good incentives, tax holidays, and you are also told in all these legislations that will be provided with land, with foreign currency, and with everything. I mean, you can have lots of promises in each proclamations, only to find yourself in a very difficult situation when it is going to be implemented on the ground. Addis Chamber considers these legislations a step forward compared to what it used to be in the previous communist regime. Of course, since 1992, the economy has been gradually being liberalized, but there are still lots of issues, lots of problems that still hold back the investment environment, the investment climate in the country. But all in all, I could say that, and Chamber say also, that the investment climate looks very good. But the structure of the government, the political system, and the vestiges of communist ideology still deeply penetrating into the bureaucratic mindset of our country is not friendly to the investment climate, to the business climate. We still have the old stereotype on the private sector and on investment. We still have the wrong approach of the public bodies in their attitude, in their interaction with the business community and with the investors, foreign or local. So there is a need that we have to tackle all this problem one way or the other. There is no, for instance, I was watching the presentation by our Kenyan colleague, the interaction between the government and the business community, the kind of dialogue that they have with different government bodies. This is a far cry in Ethiopia. There are few associations that the government approaches separately and in isolation, and there may be some success stories of the dialogue between government bodies and such associations like the horticulture, the construction sector some time ago, and other associations. But there is no an integrated, coherent, harmonized dialogue between the business community and the government in Ethiopia. So this is a very serious problem that we have in our country. Yes, there was a sort of memorandum of understanding signed between the Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce and the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And there were some attempts to make discussion, dialogue on the problems of the private sector, the business community. And there are some steps taken by government bodies, but this is not sanctioned by a legislative framework, and it was only the free will of officials for it to be conducted. There was time when the Prime Minister used to make a very ceremonial meeting and making a gentleman agreement with the business community on issues that are raised, but only to become abandoned a year later or two. So we don't have an organized dialogue forum with the public bodies, and that will continue to spoil, to pollute the investment and the business environment between the business community and the government. That's all I can say. Thank you very much.
I mean, with your consulting and trade business and also as an entrepreneur, you have seen the challenges of this, right? So looking at it from the small and medium enterprises lens, what do you see are the major challenges?
Yes, well, thank you. To be honest, the challenge of SMEs is not different from the others. So just like this woman Flora said, they need access to so many things, but obviously there is only little we can do so in a nutshell, there is challenge in access to finance. Hopefully with the IFL being set and other innovative financial tools, it would minimize the risk of SMEs being dependent on the collateral-based financing. So that's a critical issue. However, we also encounter that there is a lot of skill problem. Skill meaning like if you specifically want to connect it to the industrial parks, you would want enterprises to be connected to the backward linkage process of the enterprises in the IP. In that case, you would need enterprise thinking rather than entrepreneurial thinking. In many cases, micro businesses start, as one person, and then they grow, so they stagnate in their growth due to lack of operational excellence. So, and you also see that they're like somebody said, the SMEs currently, they just are forgotten somewhere. The micros are kind of being supported by the micro institutions. At the small and medium, the moment they actually graduate to the other level, they really lose, support from the government or from other institutions. So little has been done so far. What we would need is really the graduation process to be easier for them to be more enterprise. And that also comes into them also not knowing each other and working together. So collaboration is not, so if someone is making shoe, you see them making the shoe. But you would imagine a system whereby someone is making the sole and somebody else is making the leather. So if you create that level of working together industrially, you can actually have a better way of serving the industrial parks. Because most of the time when we engage with industrial parks, say, oh, can you work with SMEs? They say, oh, they can't scale. So the reason they can't scale is because they are really specialized in one thing, and that requires a lot of input, a lot of specialization. So, so that is something we can think about, is like how can we make sure we identify the companies that are working on specific sectors, make them work together to actually also feed one another to be strong enough to supply. For instance, we had an experience whereby the Dutch companies were interested to import spices at a very high volume. We really tried to connect, but we couldn't. So the project went to Tanzania, and that's now like $500 million project. So the problem is like we can't scalably serve international markets. That's why I'm also very much champion of inter-Africa work. So I think we are more forgiving to one another. So if I can't deliver today, you are more inclined to explain your situation to an African entrepreneur than a big corporate. So if we work with African SMEs more, I think we can learn more from one another. And at the same time, you don't have the imposed ISO regulations and all these difficult criteria that most SMEs cannot fulfill. So the only way SMEs mostly can get engaged in the export is really being involved in the industrial parks as a supply chain partners. That means if I have an agriculture producing, I don't know, agri-food processing, we'll have to see how many of them can actually supply those needs towards these organizations. The other one, what I see, and it's also related to the industrial parks, is skill. I think it's been spoken with the gentleman, but I think the mismatch also comes because we don't understand what we produce. So next to working in the private sector, we actually also have a training company for 14 years in Ethiopia. What we see is we don't see what the private sector is looking for in the education system as such. So you see the mismatch. People are coming, promised something else than they can. That happens because the academics do not consider the need of the industries as such. So I would imagine a space whereby we have an excellence center where you have a good understanding of what does the private sector look for, what skill set. In the past, we could survive not being that way, but we can't anymore because any skill you have today is absolute in 5 years. So you need, as an education, I would say, sector, you really need to work around continuously preparing people to the 21st century skill set. Then we can talk about talent. Obviously, as one corporate level, we have extremely good talents, but if you want to scale at the level of the labor jobs that are, the jobs that are needed, you really need to work also with SMEs. We hate so many times they say, I can't find someone, and then, he's hopping from this job to another job, I don't know why he is leaving me, and I'm always producing people. So what happens is that the corporates mostly are actually, the place where the employees of SMEs are going, and SMEs are too weak not to pay the salary. So the corporates also and the IPs really have to understand the need for them to also invest in the education system, not to liquidate in terms of HR liquidation, if I call it, to the SMEs, and that comes only if the corporates also understand the need and the capability of the SMEs. Yeah.
Thank you all. So we had more questions. But in your time, I want to give 1 or 2 chances to have a very urgent lunch prioritized question to the audience. If you have, I'll give it out to you because I'll put my questions. Any burning questions you want to ask the panelists here? Okay, so now you're all happy. Okay, so we want to thank the audience for your attention and also the panelists for their very in-depth discussions. I think the majority of the points that we have all learned is, we have very good opportunities on the ground, but we need a lot of collaboration, right? Public and private. We need a lot of provisions within the policies to be implemented, not just designed, but also implemented. I think our tax needs to be understanding of our ecosystem, skills match is also crucial, and also, of course, the burning questions where the market economy is forex and also the stability. So these were the areas that we think as homework for all, and we take progress today. Thank you.